Starmer's immigration U-turn, when your own party turns against you. Right, settle in because what I'm about to tell you will completely shatter any illusions you might have had about Labour unity on immigration policy. Keir Starmer has just performed one of the most spectacular political U-turns in recent British history, unveiling an immigration crackdown so severe it would make Priti Patel blush, and his own party members are absolutely furious about it. We're talking about a Prime Minister who spent years attacking conservative immigration policies, only to implement measures that are arguably even tougher, while his most prominent allies publicly savage his approach. If you thought Labour's first year in power was rocky, you haven't seen anything yet. Let's start with the bombshell numbers that force Starmer's hand, because they are genuinely staggering and explain why he's panicking. Net migration hit nearly 1 million in 2023, roughly the population of Birmingham, while over 700,000 more people entered the UK legally than left it in the year to June 2024. These aren't the migration levels of a country with controlled borders. These are the migration levels of a country that's completely lost grip of its immigration system. The political reality is simple. Labour inherited a migration crisis that makes their election promises about controlled immigration look like fantasy politics. But here's where it gets absolutely fascinating and politically explosive. Starmer's response has been to implement what he calls an end to Britain's failed experiment in open borders, introducing measures that fundamentally reshape Britain's approach to immigration. We're talking about raising the qualifying period for UK citizenship from 5 years to 10, requiring higher English proficiency tests, and demanding bachelor's degrees for skilled worker visas. This isn't tinkering around the edges. This is a wholesale transformation of Britain's immigration system that goes far beyond anything the Conservatives ever dared implement. The political calculation behind this dramatic shift is transparently obvious, and it's all about Reform UK breathing down Labour's neck. Starmer's challenge is cutting new arrivals far enough to undermine reform support while limiting disruption to British services that rely heavily on foreign labour. It's a political tightrope walk that's already causing massive internal tensions within the Labour Party, because many of their core supporters didn't vote for a government that would implement immigration policies tougher than anything Theresa May ever proposed. Now, here's where the story gets really juicy, because Starmer's own allies are publicly demolishing his approach. Sadiq Khan, the three-term London mayor and one of Labour's most high-profile figures, has been scathing in his criticism. When Starmer warned that without immigration controls we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together, Khan's response was blunt. Not the words I would have used. That's diplomatic speak for the Prime Minister's talking absolute nonsense, and coming from someone who's supposed to be on the same team. It's political dynamite. But Khan's criticism goes much deeper than just disagreeing with Starmer's rhetoric. The London mayor has been arguing that politicians need to be brave on immigration, but not in the way Starmer thinks. Khan believes the problem isn't immigration itself, but how it's been managed alongside austerity policies that have created competition for resources. His vision is essentially the opposite of Starmer's, more targeted immigration combined with proper investment in public services, rather than blanket restrictions that damage the economy. The split becomes even more dramatic when you look at Khan's specific policy proposals. The London mayor has been begging Starmer to open the floodgates to more EU migrants, advocating for a youth mobility scheme allowing 18 to 30-year-olds to live, study and work in the capital. While Starmer is implementing some of the toughest immigration restrictions in decades, his own party's most successful politician is actively campaigning for more immigration. The contradiction is so stark it would be comedic if it weren't so politically damaging. Then there's Lord Blunkett, the former Labour Home Secretary, who's taken a completely different approach to criticising Starmer's immigration policies. Blunkett is urging Starmer to go even further, backing away from the European Convention on Human Rights and implementing deportation deals with safe countries that would override ECHR protections. So while Khan thinks Starmer is being too tough on immigration, Blunkett thinks he's not being tough enough. It's a perfect illustration of just how fractured Labour's approach to this issue has become. The irony of Blunkett's intervention is particularly delicious because it's essentially advocating for policies that would make Reform UK proud. Here's a Labour peer, someone who helped shape New Labour's approach to civil liberties, now arguing for the kind of hardline immigration measures that would have been unthinkable in his party just a few years ago. The transformation of British politics on immigration is so complete that former Labour Home Secretaries are out hawking Nigel Farage. What makes this internal labor warfare particularly damaging is how it exposes a fundamental incoherence of their position on immigration. During the election campaign, they criticized conservative immigration policies as inhumane and economically damaging. Now they're implementing policies that are arguably tougher, while their own senior figures publicly attack them from both directions. It's political schizophrenia that makes them look incompetent and unprincipled simultaneously. The broader context makes this even more politically toxic for Labour. Sadiq Khan has already warned that after a difficult first year in office, Labour must really pick things up, describing the party's performance as not very good despite some policy achievements. Immigration policy was supposed to be an area where Labour could demonstrate competent governance and clear differences from the Conservatives. Instead, it's become another source of division and confusion that reinforces the impression of a government that doesn't know what it's doing. The timing couldn't be worse for Starmer's political prospects. Just as it's trying to rebuild Labour's credibility on economic management and public services, the immigration issue is creating new problems that distract from his core messages. Every day spent defending immigration policies against attacks from his own party members is a day not spent talking about the NHS, education, or economic growth. It's political malpractice on a grand scale. The policy details themselves reveal just how dramatic Starmer's shift has been. The care worker visa route will close for overseas recruitment. English language requirements are being tightened, and the qualification threshold for skilled worker visas are rising significantly. These aren't minor adjustments. They are fundamental changes that will affect thousands of families and businesses across Britain. The economic impact alone could be enormous, particularly for sectors like healthcare and hospitality that rely heavily on immigrant workers. What's particularly striking is how Starmer's immigration crackdown contradicts his previous positions on almost every level. His views have clearly changed, making him vulnerable to attacks about authenticity and consistency. Politicians can evolve their positions, but when that evolution involves abandoning core principles and alienating your own supporters, it looks less like growth and more like political opportunism. The international implications are equally concerning. Britain is implementing immigration restrictions at precisely the moment when demographic trends suggest we need more working-age immigrants to support an aging population. Other European countries are liberalizing their immigration systems to compete for global talent, while Britain is building higher barriers. It's economic self-sabotage disguised as political necessity. The Conservative response has been predictably gleeful, because Starmer has essentially validated their entire approach to immigration policy. When Labour governments are implementing Conservative immigration policies, it becomes much harder to argue that there's a meaningful difference between the parties on this issue. Starmer has handed his political opponents a massive victory by abandoning the principles that were supposed to distinguish Labour from the Conservatives. Looking ahead, this immigration controversy could define Labour's entire time in government. If the policies succeed in reducing migration numbers without causing economic damage, Starmer might be vindicated. But if they damage key sectors while failing to satisfy immigration hawks, he'll have the worst of both worlds: economic disruption combined with continued political pressure from Reform UK. The internal Labour dynamic suggests this controversy is far from over. Khan and Blunkett represent different factions within the party, and neither is likely to stay quiet about policies they fundamentally oppose. Starmer will face continued pressure from both directions, those who think he's gone too far and those who think he hasn't gone far enough. It's a political nightmare that could consume his entire premiership. So there you have it. Keir Starmer's immigration U-turn, a policy shift so dramatic it's created civil war within his own party while failing to satisfy his political opponents. Khan thinks is too tough, Blunkett thinks is not tough enough, and Starmer is left trying to defend policies that contradict everything he previously stood for. It's political chaos masquerading as decisive leadership, and it perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with British politics today. What's your take on Starmer's immigration crackdown? Is he right to abandon Labour principles to chase Reform voters, or is this a betrayal of everything the party should stand for? And can a government survive when its own senior figures are publicly attacking its core policies? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe to UK Connors, because when political parties are at war with themselves, someone needs to document the carnage.